Hello everyone, welcome back to Fundamentals of Python Bootcamp. My name is Omin Seni and I'll be your instructor throughout the course. This is lecture number 5 and today we are going to learn variables, functions and numbers in Python. So let's get started. So we have created a few notebooks for you. Uh, let's open our environment. Okay, so in today's lecture, first we will be learning like how we can assign variables, and then we will learn how we can define functions and methods in Python, and then in the last we are going to understand what are numbers in Python. So let's get started with variable assignment. So in Python, unlike another languages like C++, Java, we don't need to specify the data type of the variable we are going to assign. So in Python we just give the name of the variable and we assign the value. So like in here we are doing x equals to 5, y equals to John, which is a string variable, and then we are just printing both the variables. Okay, so we can even change the type after they are being defined. So let's say here in case x is an integer variable, and then if we want to change it, we can change it further as well. So let's go to this cell. What it says, let's x equals to 5, which is a type of integer, and we have declared it in the line number 1. And if we want to change back, and we want x to store some different value other than integer value, then we can do that very easily. It's not an issue in Python, so we can do directly like x equals to any string we want to update. So here in case x is a string Sally. Okay, so as in here you can see no data type mentioning while defining any variable. Python is smart enough to check what is the data type of any variable we have assigned, and then we can change the value inside the variable as well. Alright, casting. So what is the casting? Let's say we have any variable and we want to convert that variable into some different variable data type. Then we can surely do that. We have some functions in Python. Let's understand it. So here in case, let's say we want 3, which is a number, integer number, and we want to convert it into a string of 3. Then we can pass it in this str function, and then it will be assigned to x, which will be x as a string. Then this 3 is integer, this is altogether same value. We can convert 3, which is integer, into floating number as well, that is 3.0, which is assigned to z. So after assigning, we can just check what are the data type of these variables. So okay, I'm commenting out these two lines and then just check what are the values of x and y. So initially x is string and y is integer, because we have assigned x equals to str of 3 and y is integer of 3, and that's what we are getting here as an output for type. So you can see type function. So type function is a function which we can use for checking what is the type of any object or any variable in Python. It will give us the class name, and that's a very easy way to understand what kind of value that particular variable or object is storing. Alright, let's uncomment it back and just update the values of x and y. So now we are assigning x equals to 5 and y equals to a string John, and then just check it. Then x variable data type is integer and y variable's data type is string. So it's quite simple and straightforward. You can switch back with any variable type, float, integer, string, boolean, whatever it is, or any object in Python. It's not an issue. You can surely reuse any variable in the same script. Okay, let's, if we want to define string variable, how we can do it. So in earlier versions of string definition, we have used double quotations. So in Python, we can use single quotations as well while defining any string. So x equals to John and x equals to John in single quotation. These two both variables and values are exactly same. No differences. Third thing is case sensitive. Any variable which are upper or lower case, these two variables are not same, these are different, which means these are case sensitive. Let's say for example, if we do uh, roll number equals to 8 and roll number equals to 8, these two both variables are different and we can use it separately. So you can see two variables are being shown as a suggestion in Jupyter Notebook. So maybe you have some this question like how I'm getting these suggestions. So once you write any variable name, you can just type tab. Let's say I have written this ROL and then I type tab, then I'll get the suggestions in any IPy kernel or any Jupyter Notebook. So it's quite good feature. You can use it. One more thing I'll give you, we can check the documentation of any function as well. Just type shift tab and you will get the docstring of any function. So here in case you are getting the docstrings for print function. Okay, so let's print roll number and print roll number. Both are different values. You can see that. So that's how we can define any variable in Python and how we can do typecasting of any variable and string definition and how every variable is case sensitive. Alright, let's jump to the second topic, which is functions in Python, and it's very important topic. Try to grab everything how we can define and what all things are there in Python's function definition. So okay, so in this lecture, what we are going to explain you that is how to create Python function. So function will be one of our main building blocks when we construct any large amount of codes. So why we want function? So what is function and why we want it? So formally, a function is useful device that group together a set of statements so they can be run more than once. So that's why we define a function. They can also let us specify parameters that can serve as input to the function. So we can specify what will be the different values that we are going to use in the function. So more and all, over and all, the function is basically gives us a flexibility that we are not have to define the same code repeatedly in multiple situations. So that's why we need function. It's very good thing. So in Python we use def statements for defining any function. So let's start with it. So here you have like here you are saying any general pseudo code of how we can define a function. So initially we begin with def, then a space that is being followed by the name of the function, and then we can specify the parameters or the arguments inside these parentheses. So that's how we can define any function, first line and then colon, and then after that using the indentation we define the body of the function, and in the last we can set up our result statements that are return statements. So for example, len is a good name for length function. So try to keep the name of the function should be meaningful and relevant to the what we are defining inside it, and be careful with the names like we have discussed earlier with identifiers. So you should use accordingly by defining any name of the function. Okay, uh, after this we define doc strings, which are basically documentation string of any function. And then in the last are do statements and our return statements. Let's try to build some our own functions. So here in case we are defining any hello function, and def space say underscore hello, which is very simple function and it always says hello. Basically it always print hello. Let's define it. Uh, So we have defined this say underscore hello function, and if we call it, we can use directly the function name and then parenthesis. And if we have any parameters, we can pass the value of the parameters. So here in this function definition, no parameters are like expected, so we don't need to pass any value here. And then if we call it, it will print hello. Second example, a simple greet function which always say hello to any specific person. So def greeting is a function which accept any name, basically a variable name, and we print hello and the name of the person. So we have defined and we are passing greeting Jatin. So hello Jatin. So it is actually printing and using the parameter values here. Okay, how we can set up return values? So for example, if we want to define any addition function, then we can do def space add underscore num. This is the name of the function, and then we are passing two parameters num1 and num2 separated by commas and in the end column, and we are returning num1 plus num2 directly. So let's call this function add underscore num 4 comma 5. It will return us num1 plus num2, which is 9. Let's say if we do 50 plus 4, then it will give us 54. Okay, you can also save as variable due to return. So when we do return statement, it actually returns the values we are actually passing in the return statement. So we can store it as well. So we can store this value add underscore num 4 comma 5, which is 54, into some variable that are results. So let's print result. It will print 9. Okay, I'll show you one thing as well. If we call this and we check what is the type of this function calling, so it will give us integer. Why so? Because num1 plus num2 is giving us an integer value. If we pass um, 4 comma 50.0, which is 4 plus a floating number, it will give us a float. Why so? Because it is smart enough to understand what is the return statement, what kind of value it is returning. So it's quite simple and very easy to handle the function while we're returning any value. So it's a good type, good approach to understand what a function is actually returning, what kind of value this function is actually returning. Sometimes a function can return multiple types of values in Python. Okay, what happens if we put input to string? So we are doing print add num 1 and 2. So it's kind of a tricky thing for you guys. We are passing strings and it is actually appending both the strings. And what we are doing, we are actually adding the numbers and still we are getting the output. So it's kind of a weird. No, it's not. Why so? Uh, Due to operator overloading, we can add two strings as well. So in Python, this operation, which is plus operation, is acceptable in strings as well. So we can do this. Okay, let's try to use more things as well. So let's also start with break, continue, pass statements in our code. So why we need these statements? So we have understand till now that what is the return statement. So now it's time for break, continue, and pass. Okay, we know a number is prime if the number is only evenly divisible by one and itself. Let's write a code for this as well. So here is a function is prime which gives boolean values. Okay, R- I'll explain you. This basically explains whether a number is prime or not. Okay, so why I change my statement? Because we are not actually returning anything or we are not dealing with the boolean values. So here we are defining this doc string, just pass it as directly using three quotations, triple quotations. Then for loop we are just passing the normal basic logic of how we can check a number is prime or not. So if this initial condition satisfied, that means the number is not prime, otherwise else the number is prime. So let's try to define this function. So we have defined it and let's pass 16. So 16 is not a prime because 16 is divisible by 2, 4 and 1. So it's uh, not a prime. Also 8. So let's pass 2. It's a prime number. and it is actually printing, it's not returning anything. So if we try to check what it is returning, just check the type. So it says none type. So it's quite obvious why, because this function is not returning anything. So that's why we're getting type as none type. We are not getting anything as a return. Alright, it's basically printing. Now I'll change my statement. So again, changing the definition of this function. Now this time it will return whether a function whether is number is prime or not. Why so? Because it is going to return some boolean values to us, so false and true. So in Python, capital TRU is a true value, which is 1, and capital FALSE is a false in Python, which is 0. And we are doing the same thing in the first condition. If the first condition satisfy, which means number is not prime. If the second also satisfy, the number is not a prime. Otherwise, in the end, it is a prime number. So let's check 14. So 14 returns false, which means it is not prime. If we pass 2, which means it is prime. So great. So now you guys can define any of your functions. We are able to pass multiple parameters, and you can define your own function. I'll give you some like assignments to solve for defining any kind of function. Alright, you guys can post any questions on the forum as well regarding functions and variable definition. Let's jump to numbers. Okay, numbers are very important. Like, it's very basic to know how we can handle numbers in Python. And in this lecture, this notebook, what we are going to learn is type of numbers in Python, basic operations, difference between Python 2 and Python 3 division. I have explained you in the lecture 1 as well. And object assignment in Python, how we can assign any number to any variable or object. So these all things we are going to understand. So type of numbers. So Python has varied types of numbers. Um, we will mainly focus on integers and floating point numbers. Okay, so integer are just whole numbers, positive or negative. For example, plus 2 and negative 2 are examples of integer. And floating point numbers in Python are notable because they have a decimal point in them. Or use an exponential e to define the number. So we can also define exponential numbers in Python as well, just using capital E. So okay, so we have another type of numbers as well. For now, just take it floating point numbers and integer, because there are other mathematical definition numbers as well, like complex numbers as well in Python. Yes, they exist in Python. Okay, if you are guys are interested in understanding how complex numbers are, you can just go and search, and it's kind of homework for you, and you can post out some questions on the forum as well on this topic. Okay, so throughout this course, okay, let's skip this thing. I'll share you this notebook. It's English basically. Okay, basic arithmetic. We can add numbers. 2 plus 1, it will return 3. 2 minus 1, which will return us 1. 2 multiplied by 2, which is 4, and 3 divided by 2, which is 1.5. So right now we are using Python 3, that's why it is giving us 1.5. And earlier in like before I executed this cell, output was 1, because Python 2 returns 1 as an output. It's kind of an issue in Python 2. Okay, so the same difference I explained you in the lecture 1, that is division has some kind of um, not fully support in Python 2. It is not giving us the right answers. So 3.0 divided by 2 gives us 1.5 in Python 3, uh, whereas if we do that same thing in Python 2, it will give us 1 only. Okay, um we can just understand what all things are these. And okay, this future module, so future module is actually very great thing. I have explained this thing as well in the first lecture. We can import any future updates that are going to be available in the next possible version of Python, and we can use it. So if you are using Python 2 and you want Python 3 version of division, then you can import it directly and then you will get the answer. Okay, let's continue. So if we want to do power, so we want exponentials, we can do 2 star star 3, which is basically 2 raised to the power 3, and it gives us 8. If we do 4, it will give us 16. We can do also roots because we can surely divide and mm, like change the root way, and 4 raised to the power half, it will give us the root of the numbers, square root basically. Order of operations followed in Python. So let's check how is order is working. So 2 plus 10 star 10 plus 3, and it is giving us 105. So you can just see 10 star 10 is 100 plus 2 plus 3. So which means multiply has more priority while doing any operation execution. So quite simple BODMAS rule. So it will actually solve the bracket first and then multiplication and so on and so forth. Okay, variable assignments, again how we can assign variables to any variable in Python as number. So a equals to 5, this is how we can define any variable. We can add variables directly as well, so we can apply arithmetic operations directly on any variable if it is a number. So a plus a gives us 10, so it's smart enough, a is an integer and it is doing the arithmetic operation. So we can do a minus a gives us 0, uh, a multiply a, sorry, a multiply a star star a. So we can do all of these things. Okay, what happens on reassignment? So let's say a equals to 10, we are changing the value, a equals to 5 to a equals to 10, and the value is changed, so we can override the values. Okay, so let's see what other thing saying. The name you use when creating these labels needs to follow these rules. Basically, the how we can define the name of any variable. Okay. Okay, using variable names can be a very useful way to keep track of different variables in Python. So use variable names very wisely and it should be relevant to what we are doing with the variable. So let's say in this case my income equals to 100 and tax rate is 0.1. What will be my taxes in the end of the year? So it will calculate my taxes, and which is basically $10. Let's say if example um earning $100 in a year and the tax rate is 1%, then I have to give basically 10%. I have to give $10 to the government as a tax. So what we have learned, so we have learned some of the basics of number in Python. We also learned how to do arithmetic and use Python as a basic calculator. We can so we can like basically let's wrap it up here and like variable assignments in Python as well. So I guess all of these things are covered for this lecture: variable, functions, and numbers. Now you can define any function, do basic things. Uh, you can assign any variable, you can do any operations on the numbers as well. Okay, keep posting your questions on the forum. Thank you so much.